Today, we are going to dig deep into how one recent decision of the United States is set to have a far reaching effect on India's IT services sector and the talent pool that are a part of it.
The context to look at is that traditionally we had 92% approval rate. Last year it was 98%. And this year already, we have 7,000 applications, and of which 6,800 have been approved. Again, a 97% application approval rate. Inevitable, but to be near the customer or have to be on site for the reasons cited like proprietary, IP driven, or security reasons.
So that brings me to the dream of most of the engineers today. Get into engineering, get into one of the top 5 IT services firms as a ticket to go to the US. How does that change things from a education system or the talent pool point of view?
I think in India, engineering is not going anywhere. That's what I see from the education system point of view. See, even last year, if 8 lakh people passed out, 2.5 lakh of them were computer science graduates. So I still think in the context of it, there is a kind of a short-term headwind, you call it, but in the long term, it will be very difficult to bet against Indian IT.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Digital Playbooks with Sindhu. In this show, we'll speak to industry leaders and experts to decode developments that are altering the course of the technology industry. Today, we are going to dig deep into how one recent decision of the United States is set to have a far-reaching effect on India's IT services sector and the talent pool that are a part of it. So lately, we've seen that every announcement out of Washington is having aftershocks in India. The latest one being a $100,000 H-1B fee on new H-1B applications. So this is based on an order by the US president. Well, from the US point of view, this makes sense because they want to have more jobs for their American STEM graduates. But for the Indians, this is going to be a big hit as they make up over 70% of the current H-1B holders. Further, the H-1B allocation system is also said to be tweaked, and it's going to be made linked to the salaries of the H-1B applicants and not the lottery system as it used to be. So all this essentially is being looked at as a tariff on services at a time when India is already reeling under the tariff on its merchandises. So what will the Indian IT services firms do now? Will they hire more onshore? And what about the big tech companies who depend on a high degree on the foreign talent? Will they send more jobs over to India in their GCCs? So a lot of questions, a lot of roadblocks. And so today we have with us a person who can help us answer through all this. So we have with us Kamal Karanth, the co-founder of specialist staffing firm Xpheno. So Xpheno's team of over 320 recruiters have deployed over 28,000 IT and engineering specialists in the last 8 years of their operations. And the company is also partnering with Greenfield GCCs to power their HR needs. So Kamal, thank you so much for joining us today. And, maybe you'd be a best person to look at it from the point of view of the talent itself. This is a huge, not just an impact on the IT services industry, but also on the tech talent, which is in the lakhs and millions today in India. So maybe you could just start off by sharing your initial views on this topic. Kamal?
Thank you, Sindhu and Business Line, for having me today. Happy to dive into the context of where we are. And Sindhu, like you pointed out, it's been a kind of the biggest ripple wave that is hitting the Indian IT services industry to start with. But also maybe, Sindhu, it's important to understand where we stand and a bit of a historicity to H-1B in the past and where it is now. And I want to take you through the 2024 numbers as it stands to start with. When you look at the top 5 users amongst the tier 1 companies in terms of H-1B are Tata, Infosys. When I say Tata, I mean TCS, Infosys, HCL, LTI, Wipro, and Tech. These are the top users of H-1B as we stand today. Of course, in the tier 2 set of companies, the mid-cap cohort companies, as we call them, Mphasis, Persistent, Hexaware, and L&T, and Birlasoft are the top users in that order that I mentioned. And we also did track the top 18 IT services companies. In that, we looked at the top 6 Indian listed tier 1 companies. We looked at the 10 mid-cap companies, some of them I mentioned now, and the 2 US headquartered IT services companies. So when we looked at the top 18 companies and we looked at last 10 years, what have they done when it comes to H-1B? And in the last 10 years, in terms of their applications, this cohort have actually applied for about 414,000 H-1B applications. That's about 414,000 people that applications they want put together. And in that, 3.82 lakhs, that is 382,000 applications have been approved. So which means almost 92%. Their average approval rate is 92%, which is fantastic.
Right.
Now, with that, what you can see is when you fast forward that means traditionally they've got it right. Let's put it this way, that most of their applications have gone through. So these companies, 18 odd companies that we studied with about 4,14,000 applications they did, and getting 3,81,000 right means they know how this process works. And possibly they have used that for their clients, and when I talk further, you will see how they've actually deployed it in terms of their salary ranges and things like that. So when you look at year to date right now, I just took 2025, how are they faring? These 18 companies that I mentioned and their associated entities, for example, have recorded almost 7,000 applications, and they've got 6,800 approvals so far, only 200 denials this year, right?
Okay.
So right now, as this year, they have a 97% approval rate against a traditional 92% rate. If I take you back a year ago, because it's good to look at the trend, 2024 per se, these 18 companies had collective total applications of about 36,400, thereabouts. That is last year, 2024. So in that, once again, they've got very high approvals. They've got 35,000 approvals. That means 98% approval rate last year. So one you can say is it's the US administration, the H-1B, whosoever is administering, are in sync with the applications we're doing. They're not rejecting it in a big way over the last year or so. So there is a need for these skills. And the context to look at is they traditionally had 92% approval rate. Last year it was 98%. And this year already, we have 7,000 applications, and of which 6,800 have been approved, again a 97% application approval rate. So this is the context of H-1B I want to put into the context at this point of time, Sindhu.
Right, right, Kamal. That helps. Thanks a lot for that. So now, when we look at going ahead, there's going to be 100,000 fee on every new application. So that means, be it Indian IT services or be it any even the big tech companies, the product companies. This is quite a steep cost to pay for a foreign worker. So in your opinion, how will this play out? How important? What are some of the critical roles for which perhaps they will restrict applying this H-1B? Will they get more of the job done through their maybe onshore centers? How is it going to play out in your view?
I think it's important to look at the salaries getting paid for the H-1B also to set the context right. Yes, clearly there is going to be an impact, and we are hearing from the authorities that it will be for the next lottery phase. It's not for renewals and the next phase in which we are going. And I was quickly looking through what kind of salaries are getting paid by, let's say, the Indian IT services companies on an average, and how much do, let's say, the large tech companies who are based in US, for the US product companies like, let's say Microsoft, Google, what are they paying? So in the context of if you differentiate between Indian IT services companies and the FANG or the product tech companies of US, there is a huge salary gap on an average. So what we perceive at this point of time, what we're hearing from our customers is that the high salary, there are companies which are paying 550,000 per annum for some of the skills. The numbers may not be large, but still they're significant numbers. And these are all US entities which are paying that kind of salaries. Whereas when you see the average of Indian IT service companies, they are in upwards of about $100,000. So what we are hearing is that the high-end skills, there's no go. Even if they want to apply for additional 100,000, if they're already paying 500,000, will they pay 100,000 more for a critical skill is the question. And looks like the answer will be yes, for really high-end skills that are inevitable, but to be near the customer or have to be on site for the reasons cited, like proprietary, IP driven, or security reasons. So, and other angle is relationship driven. So these reasons would actually ensure that some of these skills will continue to be there, and maybe companies won't mind paying for it and they'll budget for it rather. The second angle is that clearly, would it lead to more offshoring? We know in India over the last few years, and especially in the last 3 years, we have seen every week one new GCC, the Global Capability Centers, starting their operations in India. And
Okay.
companies don't come to India to hire 100 people, 200 people. Most of them who have come in the last 3 years had a minimum expectation that they will hire at least 500 people. So in that sense, could we see more number of jobs getting offshored to either, let's say, the GCCs, which have formed quite a bit, or will more offshoring or outsourcing happen to IT services companies? These are two strong, distinct possibilities that we see as an immediate fallout of this. And of course, there is talk about for some of these skills, will companies open up more nearshore centers? That means going to Canada, going to a South American, some of these countries, or will they increase local hiring? So
Right.
these are the possibilities. Again, it's a dollar and cents issue, but we believe that the skills required for this and the scale in which they need to be recruited and the potential dollar leverage or the rupee leverage we have may push these jobs more to India, unless some new act will actually prevent that from happening.
Right. So that's exactly what also is on the anvil, I suppose, right? I mean, there is a threat of another bill or bill, depending on how it takes a passage into an act. The putting a levy of, I think, around 25% on outsourcing the jobs that are sent outside the US. So how will that kind of is something to watch out for keenly if the bringing more jobs to India is going to be one of the areas where the big tech companies follow. How do you see that?
Yeah, they call it the Hire Act. If the Hire Act comes, there is a proposal that if they levy 25%, wouldn't it become more costlier to, sort of for these companies who are currently operating at a certain cost level? So that's definitely a threat, the Hire Act, over and above the 100,000 fee that currently exists. But when I look at the Hire Act per se, and I want to possibly give an example of one of the skills that I just want to put in front of you, Sindhu. It's not easy, to have that many number of people to be appointed in US overnight. Yes, over the last 10 years, if you see the number of STEM graduates originating from US or passing out from US have increased steadily. In fact, you compare 10 years ago to now, last year actually produced the highest number of STEM graduates in US. For example, last year almost 1.3 or 1.4 lakh equivalent of engineer graduates pass out from US. That's not small. However, for them to be ready, to be job ready, because US never invested in skilling these guys to be job ready, and most of these companies had invested in India, it would take the 2 to 3 year time for even these new STEM graduates to get ready as per the market requirement. But I wanted to bring you back to where I started from a cost leverage point of view. If they add 25%, what would it mean? For example, let's take an example of, let's say, a Python engineer. Python engineer, 3 to 5 years experience. The monthly average salary in US would be about close to $13,000. Just
Right.
the monthly salary of somebody in US, 3 to 5 years, Python engineer experience. The same skills in India per month would cost $2,300, the lower end. Higher end would be just short of $3,000. In US,
Right.
the lowest level would be about, like I said, $12,800, $13,000. The highest range there would be about $16,500 a month. So there you go. You add 25% to $3,000 and see whether it is still economical for you to hire in India, or would you still go and hire in US because they're living 25%, right? So I'm
Right.
just giving you one example. I can go on with many such examples. And it is not just salary. So you have to think that in US you have individual insurance. You have to, on an average, it costs $7,500 annum. Family insurance about $20,000. Almost a dental vision kind of facilities they provide. They're about $1,000 an average per annum. Retirement 401k about close to $8,000, and these are on 6% of annual salaries, right? And of course, there are other perks related to another $500, $700 gym, other things companies give to IT workers there. In India, all these things, if you put together, hardly cost you anything. Even if you take 12% of your basic salary on PF, family insurance, which is actually optional in India, but companies, MNCs and good companies provide, which is close to about $200 per annum. Insurance, even if you take individual, just about around $200. So if you look at the example I gave of just the Python engineer, which is 3 to 5 years experience, $3,000 on the higher side and $16,000 on the higher side. So I think it's you have to look at it from a skill context point of view. This is just the cost, but it is not just cost. I met a large consulting company, but they were about $1.5, $2 billion in US, who set up shop in India last year, and we worked with them and scaled up their first 200 people. The CEO who met me told me this, that, look, I'm in Seattle, and if I'm about 400 people now. For me to grow the way I'm growing, I need to have at least 1,000 people. For me to get to 1,000 people in US from where I stand looks impossible. To get that kind of a skilled people, it will cost me, he gave a number, it will cost me so many $1 million. Whereas in the first year or so, we scaled him up to 500 people in India. And that's when they had a lot of lateral talent in the accounting, fund accounting, risk modeling kind of skills they had in India pretty easily. And this year, they've gone to campuses and hired freshers. So
Right.
clearly, companies are not coming to India, not just because of cost arbitrage. Cost arbitrage is a given, because in US, you cannot have them in scale and the speed in which they could hire in India. So I guess even with the Hire Act, India will still be competitive from a cost point of view. But like I said, they're still not coming here only for cost. There's a skill arbitrage and there's a scale arbitrage. And not to forget the speed in which you can recruit in India.
Got it. That's very interesting. I mean, cost arbitrage, skill arbitrage, as well as the speed at which one can scale in India, right? So,
Absolutely.
given this is the situation here, our talent ecosystem, how do you see what are clients saying? I mean, your large client base. What's the feeling now? Be it the H-1B fee or be it the Hire Act, are these being seen as small disruptions to kind of tide over? Is there some sort of nervousness overall as to how where this is all going to lead to?
See, definitely there's a bit of a nervousness in terms of the cost going off if they want to continue in this model, right? Definitely, it is going to add to their costs. And you also, it's worthwhile to look at one more case study I want to tell you, Sindhu, in terms of how this H-1B visas also have been deployed with the Indian IT services firms. I looked at top two Indian IT services firms to see what is the minimal salary they pay when they actually take people out to US. And what is the maximum they pay? When I looked at the top two Indian IT services companies, I looked at three levels. They have proficiency levels. I looked at level 2, level 3, level 4 kind of levels. In the highest number of visas they have taken, H-1 visa have taken in the lowest level. For example, if you take Infosys per se, Infosys has what they call as level 2. They have taken 2,300 people. Whereas in level 4, which is the highest level of proficiency, they have taken only 590 people. Right? So that means that the lower end of the scale seems to be the highest number that the companies are taking to US. At least the Indian IT or something. Same is the case with TCS. Out of the close to 7,000 odd numbers they have today in H-1B, looks like the level 2, they have 5,900 people, and there the average salary is about $80,000. Same with Infi. So it seems like that the companies which are exporting more level 2 people at an average salary of 85K, it may not be remunerative for them to export more such people. They may actually press their clients to possibly offshore that jobs if possible. That's the context in which I think if you look at the numbers, it will tell you that the average salaries paid is so low that it may not be very remunerative for these companies to do that. So I think, coming to your question, what the clients are telling is, look, in the short term, this is something that they have to reconfigure as a business model when they do the renewal, or rather when they go for the next slot. These business models will definitely change, because it's going to be very, very expensive for them. But whereas when you look at the FANG companies, the product companies, like, whether it's what used to be the Facebook, then today is Meta, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Netflix kind of companies, they have steadily actually hired more people in US over the last few years. At the same time, they've also offshored that many people to GCCs in India. Very interestingly, if you just look at this cohort of FANG companies, they have, in the last 12 months, imported close to 11,000 people to US. 11,000, 10,900 is the number.
Right.
And 1 in 5 of them came from India. It's almost 20%. 20% of those came from India. So US has dependency from other countries too, right? At the same time, the same FAM companies sent 6,000 people out of US in the last 12 months. And in that, 1 in 4, the job came to FANG India.
Got it.
So
Right.
what they are doing is steadily, because I'm sure all these companies had heads up as to what's going to happen soon, and they've slowly and steadily also got high-end talent to those countries. I looked at the highest salary Google paid to somebody in H-1B last 12 months. Somebody has been paid $500,000 as well, right?
Right.
At the highest level. Whereas when I looked at CTS, TCS, and Infi, the highest salary they paid is about 250K to 350K, in that range, right? So I think these companies have had a heads up. They're slowly, many of them have moved jobs to countries like India and elsewhere too at the same time. So that's how they're coping with currently. But still, Sindhu, honestly, there's still a lot of flux. Nothing has been crystallized. So this is going to be a strategy. I'm just throwing some numbers which is in front of me. But
Right.
otherwise, it is still, in my view, work in progress. They're just strategizing as to what should be done to mitigate this, including, of course, litigation.
Right, of course. And so, in terms of, I think even the new allocation system. So, if it's linked to the salaries again, then as you said, the Indian IT services seem to be hiring, bringing more of the lower paid employees under H-1B. So, I think it's more of a change of model for the Indian IT services firms, looks like, rather than the product companies, right?
Absolutely. Like I said, if 85K is or 80% of people are going at 85K to 87K average salaries per year, you definitely won't want to afford 100K on that when the new lots come.
Got it. So that brings me to the dream of most of the engineers today. Get into engineering, get into one of the top five IT services firms as a ticket to go to the US. Or you could perhaps do your master's and get into a job there. But the other route always used to be go via your Indian IT firms, get a project, get deployed, and all of that. How does that change things from a education system or the talent pool point of view? I mean, do you think more people will continue to seek an engineering education through all this disruption?
I think in India, engineering is not going anywhere. At least that's what I see from the education system point. If you see, even last year, if 8 lakh people passed out, 2.5 lakh of them were computer science graduates. I'm just talking engineering here. I'm not even talking about BSc computer science or a BCA kind of situation.
Right.
So, from an aspiration point of view, unlikely to change unless we are going to show some new qualification should get them more dollars. So, from a education point of view, I doubt whether anything will change drastically overnight. However, the routes that you mentioned, the routes of going via an IT services company, the routes via going to MS to US and through that staying back, those things have all got challenged because of the new H-1B, fees, right? So these two routes are closed. However, if you look at it, maybe uh, it would also change the destinations. Maybe more of us will find ourselves in Europe. Look at the countries where demographically challenged today. There are at least, uh, I looked at about 12, 13 countries where today they have a choice. Most of them are in Europe, and let's say I'm including countries like Japan added to that. They have to either offshore work or they have to let workers in. Otherwise, there's no way that they're going to be productive as a country. And of course, from a skills and scale point of view, and maybe even the price point of view, Indian IT skills would be at the best place to migrate to. Like you already seen Germany saying, we would possibly welcome more tech talent to our country. And I guess Indians are at the forefront of it. So, in my sense, maybe the destination may change from US. However, the route to US may also be once you're more experienced, once you're more talented, from a skill point of view, have more experience rather, and better some of the relevant skills you have, you could still go there. Maybe the same companies will be able to afford you at that stage, putting that $8,000 a month on your fee as a fee investment on you may also happen. But for now, I think what is getting affected would be people aspiring to go to US to work there eventually. That will get curtailed as a destination. And two, going to US via IT services companies as a first in the first few years will take a hit. These two things definitely will take a hit, but not from an aspiration point of view. I doubt whether people will stop studying engineering because of that.
Yeah, I mean, especially the computer science craze, even, some of our data showed from colleges this time that, counseling sessions, that people continue to prefer to get into the first CS, as the first preference. Only if you don't get it, you look at other core engineering kind of backgrounds.
Sure, sure, absolutely.
Kamal, in that sense, just for the sake of our audience, what are some of the skill sets that are commanding a premium today in these FANG companies? Where you were talking about earlier, right? If they're getting paid, say $500,000, this 100,000 one-time fee just at the time of application may not be a big deal. So, what are some of those skill sets which still have like potential for foreign workers? You feel, especially India.
See, currently the skills in demand, of course, I'm taking AI out. AI is definitely, on the forefront of it, but we have to remember that AI is still relatively new. You don't have too many experts. But I think in that, whosoever has done the maximum pilots, who have got themselves more exposed, uh, done kind of projects either in college or even in the workplace right now, AI ML is at the forefront from a skill demand point of view, followed by data science. Data science is something which has caught up in a big way. Cybersecurity is another one, and cloud followed by that. These are the four skills that we see, which is in constant demand. The demand comes in four ways: more openings, and two, clearly, the joining ratio tells us whether that's in demand, because uh, the joining ratio decides how much companies are offering to people, and also how much shopping is happening between people who are looking for the jobs. And these four skills, we see the maximum friction.
Right. Got it. Great. And what will all this, the H-1B fee or be the Hire Act, what will all this do for the Indian IT services, attrition? How has it stabilized now just to get a status check? It's gone through a lot of peaks and troughs in the last 3-4 years. So where is it currently, and how do you think this will impact it at all?
If you look at the top eight companies that we track, and even I think if you look at the top eight companies, I mean, are what I call as the bellwethers in IT services companies. Some of them I named. Uh, and we have the tier two companies. So there are two segments, right? In India, you have in these two segments, the attrition is anywhere between 12 to 18%, depending on whom you're talking about. Some of the mid-tier companies still have a higher up, 17% kind of, 17 to 18% kind of an attrition. But by and large, with the large companies, it's between 12 to 15% is a given ratio. So that's only IT services companies. However, GCCs are in the range of 10 to 12% as well, depending on which company you're talking about, right? So I won't say the attrition has stabilized because of any of these frictions that has happened because of H-1B. In the current context, if you look at the last 3 years ratio, GCCs have had almost 3.2 lakh IT professionals in India, right? So with that, you can see that the demand is steadily there. Last year, GCCs net, I'm talking about the net addition, GCCs added 120,000 tech professionals. The previous year was a bit of a blip where they added just about 60,000 people. The year prior to that, they added close to 110,000 people. So that means 3.2 lakh is what they added over the last 3 years. So steadily, because of the new GCCs that have come to India, and like I said, we have on an average one opening every week, which means uh, there is enough current cushion for IT talent to get absorbed. So
Right.
we still don't see people on the streets yet for that reason that there's still openings out there. As we speak, clearly, I could see there were 100,000 open tech jobs out there in the market in the country at this point of time. So I guess uh, as of now, there's no panic. Not that people are staying back. Still, 12 to 18% attrition is significant for a country like us.
Right. Great, great. Thank you. Thanks so much, Kamal. Anything else that you wanted to share on this topic as to, where are we today when it comes to all these disruptions? Do you think that these things will settle with the trade talks progressing? What's your take? Where do we go from here?
So the way we see is we are at the right space as a country. Clearly, we as much as we are exporting, we made business out of exporting talent, exporting services, both ways, whichever way you look at it. We kept talent here and exported services. We also exported talent, and you could see the number of people who are out there in US working from in the H-1B form, or even any other country where we sent people on an on-site model. So we, as a business model, uh, we sort of made a revenue stream so far. Some of these revenue streams may take a different shape, right? I'm sure you also saw the IT services companies, which actually employ the maximum number of IT workers today, almost sort of 7 million IT workers in India. Close to 2.5 million workers are in IT services companies. That's the single largest cohort, followed by GCC, which has close to 2 million people. So whatever happens to IT services companies will impact everyone. So smartly, what the IT services companies have done over the last year or so is they've all appointed GCC heads. where the focus is, can I work on these 1800 GCs which are in India and also make them my clients, compared to only focusing on US-based clients where the model was on-site and offshoring both. So what we see is there will be a midterm correction of the models of one, how much of on-site will happen versus how much of offshoring will happen. Two, the increase in GCCs. We believe this could push more GCCs to come to India because in spite of close to 140,000 engineers passing out in US last year, they don't have the same skill level the 7 million Indians have. So I still think in the context of it, there is a kind of a short-term headwind, you call it, but in the long term, it'll be very difficult to bet against Indian IT.
Right. Great. I think that's a good way to close. Very difficult to bet against Indian IT for our, as you said, cost arbitrage, the scale, and the skills. Thank you so much, Kamal, for joining us, and a lot of interesting data that also you shared as part of this chat. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today.